I'm Karen Madjewitz from the University of Minnesota and the Big Ten Geo Portal. I'm going to introduce our next session, which is an unconference style workshop titled GitHub Grab Bag for Geo-Librarians. So it is my pleasure to introduce our two instructors, Phil White and Evan Thornberry. Phil is the Earth, Environment, and Geospatial Librarian in the Earth Sciences and Map Library at the University of Colorado Boulder. Phil is the manager of the CU Libraries' Geo Blacklight instance, the Colorado Geo Library. And he's responsible for reference, instruction, and collection development of geospatial data. Phil also serves as the liaison librarian to geography and geological sciences at CU. He has a BA and MA in geography in addition to an MLIS. So Phil is a GitHub and Python enthusiast, and this semester he is busy teaching a 4-credit-hour class on GIS programming. Evan Thornberry is the GIS librarian at the University of British Columbia Library, where he supports teaching, learning, and research with geospatial information and technology. In his work, he coordinates efforts to improve existing resources for maps, atlases, and geodata collections, as well as library services to better equip a growing base of GIS users. Evan is a co-principal investigator for a project to create an open interactive textbook for teaching geomatics, and he's also the current president of WAML, the Western Association of Map Libraries. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Phil and Evan. Take it away.
Great, thank you, Karen. Those introductions were so good, it's almost as if we wrote them ourselves. Welcome everyone. So glad to be here and to see all of you all. I'll go ahead and share my screen with you. So Evan and I have some notes, and we went ahead and added that to the bottom of the notes document for today. And this is over on page 4, I think. So I thought we would start off with a quick land acknowledgement. So I will start off acknowledging that I live and I work on the territories of the Ute, Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Sioux peoples. There are 48 contemporary tribal nations historically tied to the lands that make up Colorado. And I'll let Evan take it.
Thanks, Phil. Yep, I'll go next. I'm on or surrounded by the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, Chemainus, Stolo, and Squamish people. And my land acknowledgement is really a sort of like my personal, part of my personal reconciliation process, especially I feel is important now when we start hearing about a lot of the news coming out of British Columbia, where I live, about Indigenous residential schools. And so I would just like to encourage you all to maybe reflect on your own experiences or Indigenous histories in the places where you live. So I'll pass it back to you, Phil.
Yeah, I know a lot of you all. Whoops, I think that's the wrong link. It's native-lands, I think. .ca is a good place to go and learn more. I'm sure many of you all have seen the native lands map where you can go and check out who lives where you live or who lived where you live now. So check that out if you're not familiar. I'm sure many of you are. We wanted to run this session like a typical GeoPhilip Camp, open, and you know, what do you call it? A unconference style. And like usual, we are asking for a couple of volunteers. We would love it if someone would volunteer to be a note taker. What we've done here on our document, we have a little agenda that is kind of loose and rough, but down below we have some notes for the different sections that we're going to be talking about and some starter links. So if someone could volunteer to be a note taker, we would greatly appreciate that. And if you want to do that, you can either let us know in the chat or just put yourself down on the note taker here. We also would like for someone to be a gatekeeper. I know that's something usually we have at Geo4Lib, which is basically someone that presses pause on Evan or I if we say something kind of inside baseball that no one knows what we're talking about. You can say like, whoa, what's that? That's what the gatekeeper is for. We would love it if there was a timekeeper to give us some kind of updates on the half hours and things like that when to help keep us on track. So any volunteers?
I'll gatekeep.
Did I hear Stace?
Yeah, I can do that.
And if you want to do all three, you can.
I'm terrible at notes.
I signed up for notes.
Cool. All right. Thanks, y'all. And if we need a timekeeper or a gatekeeper, just put yourself down.
Can I interrupt briefly?
Yeah.
I think I have confused some things because I had a different link for these notes that I put in the chat that I think some of us went to, and this is URL on a slightly different document. So I think we might need to get on the same doc. I'm sorry, I think I might have done that.
We had our own little notes doc, which I sent to you, and we didn't realize there was going to be like a running notes. So we just pasted it over into the main running notes for Geo4LibCamp. That's where we are.
Okay. So if anybody saw the bit.ly that I put in the chat, ignore it. That isn't the one we're all using.
Yeah, sorry, y'all.
About that.
I was wondering where all the volunteers were. Okay, so thought we would start off just sort of talking about how we're going to do a little annotate board. I'll stop sharing. Evan, can you do that?
I think so. Hold on, let's see. Yeah, whiteboard. Okay, so we're just going to put up a whiteboard here. And I think hopefully some of you have used this before, but this will just allow you to annotate. We are going to, I'm just going to type a couple of words in here. We're going to try to get a sense of your familiarity with this topic. So we're going to look for, oops, let me change the color here. It's kind of hard to see. So on this end of the spectrum, beginner level GitHub users, and the other end, let's see, I've got all kinds of toolbars up in front of me. Let's do like super expert. So if you can, just put a little object. You can make a star or like a check mark or something, and just to kind of indicate where you are on this spectrum. Thanks, Stace. I didn't realize that you would be able to see people's names. If you don't feel comfortable doing this, don't worry about it. But I'll add mine on there just so we're all kind of on the same page here. I'm going to put mine kind of in the middle. Maybe not super expert, but somewhat familiar. Phil, did you put yours up there?
I think I did, kind of in the near you.
I'm gonna move mine over. I just added a separate star just because I feel like maybe I'm a bit more confident than I should be. This is good.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Where's the link to this?
So this is a live annotation in Zoom. So if you see the green bar at the top of your screen that says you are viewing Evan.
Okay.
Screen, next to it in view options, you can drop that down and there's an annotate item and there's all sorts of tools.
Thank
there.
you. Oh,
yeah,
cool.
Thanks for asking.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking. And I love the random zigzags.
Yeah.
Go with it. Everything works.
Okay, great. Yeah, so this is kind of what we expected, I guess, a middle of the road, maybe a slightly wide-ranging crowd. I think Phil and I probably prepared mostly for beginner level stuff. So that could be a good benchmark for us and maybe to start with. We won't sort of like try to avoid anything that's super beginner level. And I think this is where our gatekeeper comes in. If you can keep us informed if there are any questions or if we glaze over something that might need some more explanation, please let us know. And I also think, as Phil said, we built in a lot of flexibility here. So this agenda is more of a loose structure for us to sort of base a discussion around, but we can move this in other directions too if it's too or if it's too basic, or if it's maybe not relevant to some people. Just let us know and we can move it around.
Yeah, and I will just add to that. We designed it for like librarians, really. If you're a developer or application developer, you're going to be like, yeah, we already know this. So, and I will just share an anecdote about my own skill level. On Monday, Evan and I were working on this workshop, and we did something wrong in our little repository that we were using. And I kid you not, I think it took us about 20 minutes to fix it. So to say like expert level, I would say no. I would say I'm definitely not. And I do think GitHub can be really intimidating. I acknowledge that. And I would say I do the exact same thing with GitHub that I tell like students and my students all the time. Is like, go read the documentation. And like, if it's something I don't do very often, I'm sure many of you are on the same boat. You end up having to go try to remember like the sequence of things you type in and all of that crap. So you're not alone. I have to do that stuff as well. And I'm sure Evan does as well. We wanted to start off kind of talking about just the ways that we personally use GitHub. And I will also ask you all, if you have anything particular that you want us to talk about, you can either drop it in the chat and we'll watch for it, or even better, you could put it in the notes document under the part that says other topics to discuss, kind of right after our agenda. Feel free to put things on there and we'll take a look as we're going. So we thought we would just share a little bit about how we use GitHub and also what Git and GitHub are for maybe folks that are brand new. So I'll share my screen for now. Yeah, you can drop new ideas down here. So GitHub is really at its core kind of a collaboration site. We should differentiate what GitHub is from Git. Git by itself is really software you use locally on your own computer. If you don't have it, you should go get it. It's free. And it will just download whichever operating system you're on, whether it's Windows or Mac or something else. And you can use it locally. And we will probably demonstrate a little bit of local use of Git here and there. Chiefly, we'll be talking about GitHub. So GitHub, of course, is really like a cloud collaboration backup site that uses Git. And, I think it has long had this kind of reputation as being a thing for developers. And I am definitely not a developer. And there are so many other uses that have sort of sprung out of GitHub. And that's kind of the heart of what we're going to talk about today. So I thought I would share what kind of I use GitHub for, and then Evan's going to talk about kind of how he uses GitHub. And then we're going to talk, dive in a little bit into like the project management sort of tools first that we think folks might like. So this is my GitHub sort of profile. It's a wreck. I will absolutely admit it's a wreck. So there's all kinds of stuff in here. I'd say I use GitHub for like random cloud backup of stuff of all types. I use it to host instructional materials. I'll show you some of that. I use it as like an all-purpose web content dump, and I use it for collaborating. So if you look through my repositories, you can see random things. I have something here that I did with Sam Toplitsky from Berkeley, just a project we did with a couple of other folks, and you can see a lot of the materials we had. We basically backed them all up on GitHub. We can talk a little bit more about getting stuff in here in a few minutes. If you look at some of my other repositories, there's just a ton of junk in here. I've got materials for a class. I've got some random notebooks that I use for a workshop. And on this one, usually I actually host Jupyter notebooks on here. And then we do like a Git pull to distribute data and notebooks and scripts and things like that for participants in workshops or classes. I use it, who knows, as a random dump for just a bunch of rando scripts that could be like basically anything and things like that. There's all sorts of just stuff in here. And yeah, for me, it's kind of like a do-all, catch-all webby thingy. I don't know how else to say what I use it for. I'll stop and let Evan kind of talk about how he uses it.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, I'm glad you went first because I was hesitant to reveal how hacky some of the stuff in my various organizations or personal account on GitHub are, but I'm sure we'll probably delve into that as we go along. But I'm just going to share my screen really quick. I hope that's okay. I just have like a couple of slides, and these are really for me to kind of wrap my head around what I would like to tell you about. But I put together just like a really brief timeline just to put it into perspective and to kind of provide some context for how I have used it over the time, because it has evolved and I'm still evolving. I'm still quite in the learning phase of all of this. But I started using it about 5 years ago for file creation and storage, which I think a lot of you probably are familiar with. I know Phil is. I've seen a lot of our repos, and it tends to be a lot of text-based files, Geojson, for example, metadata, open metadata, open geometadata is, a really good example. And that's sort of the essence of the file repository in my eyes. I started then sort of like using it, or 4 years ago when I started working at UBC, I, was more involved in workshop creation and, doing presentations in classes and things like that. And so I started, I think I was inspired by, and I've said this before, but some of the work from Stanford, I think I saw maybe at Geo4Live, I think I saw someone present on workshop content that they had hosted on GitHub just in a README file, which is super effective, I think, because it just provides a basic link. You can edit, you can share freely, you can put GIFs and images and things in a README file, and it's just like very basic. And again, I think it's a really effective way to sort of share quick presentations, especially presentations that you plan to reuse or share or update periodically. And also presentations, I use Reveal.js quite a bit. I know Phil does too, and probably a lot of you as well. I like it because it allows me to embed content that I don't normally embed in something like a PowerPoint. I think Google Slides probably has support for things like web maps and buttons and sharing plain text, but I started using Reveal, and it is something that I share in my GitHub repo. I actually have like a specific repo for it's just titled presentations, and I just add a new file for each presentation, and I reuse all the code, all the JavaScript and CSS for that presentation framework, and it works really well. I can share links to those presentations if like my boss is wondering, or if I need to, do some annual report, something like that. It's all in one place. It's really pretty handy. So then about a year ago, I think I made the leap, maybe a little bit more than a year ago, I made the leap from using it more of a project management and planning tool than like a file hosting tool. That means that I'm using some of the GitHub features that are built into it, like issues, project boards, pages. I guess I used a little bit before, but branches, especially working with other people, these are the sorts of things that I think are really handy for, especially issues and project boards. I found very recently are very handy, and I'll talk about that in a little bit when we kind of dig into project management tools in GitHub. But yeah, that's it's been an evolving timeline for me, and I'm curious to know if anybody else has any sort of ideas as we talk about this stuff. Please share them in the chat. Or improvements that we can make to our own workflows and techniques using GitHub. Yeah, so anyway, moving on. I also wanted to share, so I use a Mac. I know Phil, you're a Windows person, right? I think you mostly use a Windows machine. And I just wanted to kind of briefly say that I use Terminal, my Mac terminal. It's built into your Mac. If you're a Mac user, it's right there. You don't have to download it. And I use a text editor. Basically, those two things are like my two biggest tools in the tool belt. I have used Atom. I used to use Sublime as a text editor, and then I moved into using Atom because I felt like there were more features for like code, syntax, and like linters and plugins and things like that. You could soup up your text editor, your source code editor really nicely, and it's kind of like it's kind of satisfying when you have everything right there. Where things are. You have like hotkeys set up and everything. And then recently, I started using VS Code, Visual Studio Code, which is a Microsoft product, but it's awesome. And I have found that it's less buggy than Atom. If anybody's an Atom user and is on a Mac, and you have experienced lagging or bugs, VS Code has not done any of that for me. Plus VS Code, I've found some really useful plugins, and I can show you that if we get into it, but like starting up a simple web server really quick with the click of a button. There's a built-in terminal that's easy to use, so I don't always have to use my Mac terminal. And it's just like a nice piece of software that I use quite frequently. Let's see what else. Oh, and I just wanted to say about GitHub, for me, and I always have to remind myself of this, and GitHub helps, is I need to slow down a lot when I'm doing my work and not flying through things and forgetting what I need to do. And GitHub has really helped me personally to sort of like think through projects, think through tasks, document them, describe them, which I've never really been good at, but I think it's helped me sort of like overcome some of those problems that I've had in the past to like sort of like slow down, describe things, plan it out, take your time. And it has kind of helped me just sort of like be a more efficient worker, I think, and less forgetful. So yeah, I'm just going to leave it there, and then maybe we can move into the next section. Unless, Phil, did you want to share anything about sort of like some of the tools that you use?
You can keep your screen. I use Atom for my text editor. I agree. There's every now and then it has a hiccup. And then since I'm a Windows user, as someone who's pretty reliant on using ArcGIS for day-to-day stuff, I mean, I have to. I'm a Windows user, and if you download Git and install Git on your computer, many of you all have probably already done this. If you're on Windows, it comes with a terminal called Git Bash, which allows you to make Linux or Unix style commands in a Windows setting. And that's what I use. Yeah. So it's just literally whatever I got when I went to a software carpentry workshop like 6 years ago.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to trash talk Microsoft. I just meant that it was kind of ironic that I'm sort of based on a Macintosh OS, and I'm moving into using Microsoft software on it. But yeah, I do enjoy VS Code so far. All right, let's see where are we? Where are we in our? So
you're up.
Yeah, all right. So I'm up again. Okay, so let's talk about project management tools. I'm going to share my screen once again. I'm sorry that if this is annoying for people, but I'm going to open up a new screen here and talk about a few things. We're going to start with issues, GitHub issues. So for those of you, so how many, just let's see like a share of hands or you know, a note in the chat. Do people use issues quite often here for non-code development? Projects like workshop collaboration or yeah, Jira's, yeah, Jira's. So you can think of, if you're familiar with Jira, you can think of GitHub issues as something very similar. It's a ticketing system for tasks. I started using GitHub issues, I think most recently with our workshops. So we have a series of workshops that we host on GitHub, GitHub Pages, and you know, we deliver these workshops. We mention them in the live delivery that they're hosted on GitHub. If there's anything that folks would like to see, or if there's an error, or even like something small like a spelling error, we encourage people to submit issues, and those go into our GitHub repository where our workshops are stored, and we can see them as workshop hosts or workshop owners, and we can make incremental updates. So let me see if I can find one really quickly for you. So I'm going to go to, I have a few organizations that I belong to, and these organizations, these GitHub organizations are sort of like shared, you can think of them as like kind of shared accounts. There are multiple owners within these organizations. And we have an organization for my unit here at the library. And we have a bunch of different repositories, and most of the repositories are workshops, because that's mostly what we do. We have some code libraries in here, like Dryad to Dataverse and fcheck, and some other things are you know, software, pieces of software or code libraries, but most of these are just workshops. So I'm just going to go to, I think our intro to Git workshop has some issues. So here's an issue. These are our files for our workshop. We've published it with GitHub Pages, which Phil's going to talk about, and it gives us this link to the actual workshop site. But these are the files that make up this workshop. And then outside of those files, but within the GitHub ecosystem, are some extra tools. Issues is the first tab next to code, and we have one issue right now. So let's see. Oh yeah, so this was opened up a while ago. So this was a student took the workshop, and we need to change the terminology of our workshop, because when we started it, we were using terminology that has now changed. We used to refer to the main branch in GitHub as the master, and now we're using main as the preferred term for that branch. And so we need to change that terminology in our workshop. And so it becomes a discussion. This is like a ticketing system, like I said before, and we can kind of keep track of where this is. And it looks like my colleague Jeremy has changed master domain on 3 pages where it occurred, but the issue is still open. You can see this tag right here. I probably should be closed, so maybe this isn't the best example, but we could close this and call it good. Once it's closed, we can always go back and look to see what issues have closed. And I can share that again with anybody who asks, like, you know, what sort of progress have you made? What kind of work has been done on this workshop? And it's all kind of in one place and time-stamped, and most of the discussion is preserved there for us to look back on. When you open up an issue, you have a couple of options. You can assign it to people, you can assign it to yourself, or you can assign it to others that are part of this GitHub repository. And we use this quite a bit for other projects where it's, you know, we have multiple students working on things, and an issue comes up and we say, oh, you know what, this would be a really good issue or really good something for Phil to work on for a little while. So we can assign it to them. They get a notification and say, oh, let me look at that issue, something I have to do. Labels are another thing. They're sort of like tags. If I want to label an issue, I can do that, and I can use some of the built-in sort of starter labels that GitHub provides, or I can create my own just by typing into the box here, and it will create a new label for me. I'm going to show you maybe another example of a repository that I use I just started this the other day. Maybe this is a bit more for those who are like not even using code development or not even using code at all. I even use issues for projects that are just like, I mean, like it's literally just, I'm using it in place of Jira basically. But I have another organization here and I have a maps to do repository. I started this on Monday because I began meeting with a couple of folks to talk about map collection related projects. And these folks are not GitHub users at all, but they are full of information. And every time I talk to them, there's just so many things that I can think of that I need to like write down and do. And so as a result, I have a lot of notebooks and things with like very, like chicken scratch that I just like, if I wait more than a couple of days, I have no idea what it is and why I wrote it down. But issues allows me to sort of like in the moment, type in some things that, okay, I need to do this, or I need to check up with this, or, you know, Rudy needs to work on this and I can check up with him on that next week. So this was from 2 days ago. I just thought I would use this as an example for one way you could use these issues for even projects that don't have anything that you can, no files really. You're just literally using the project management tool for issues in GitHub. We'll see how it goes. So far I've been more productive than I normally am with these sort of like hanging out there and GitHub staring at me. You can see I've assigned myself to a bunch of these. And I've also created a couple of high priority ones. These are tags, and I've just sort of created some high priority tags so I can work on these first. And I've also made some tags for other people who don't have GitHub accounts, just so I know that they are working on those things. And those are things that I can check up with them next week. So yes, so those are issues. I am someone who probably supports like the more the merrier in terms of issues, to get very sort of like specific with them. And it helps, especially when you are you know, working with a larger group of people that are collaborating, to kind of like be very, don't add a whole lot of vague issues if you are working with a lot of folks on different aspects of the project, or if there are a lot of different like moving parts. It's very good to have, I think it's good to have lots of issues that are very specific. And I'll try to illustrate that here in a little bit when I talk about another project. So yeah, actually, why don't I just segue into that? Unless there are questions about issues. Phil, have you been watching the chat? Are there any comments or questions or anything? Okay, so I'm going to go to another organization. This is the Geomatics Textbook that, so we have an organization with a few different repositories in here, and this is a textbook that we're, so I'm collaborating with our faculty of forestry here at UBC to put together a textbook for teaching geomatics, which includes just a lot of like open content and interactives, and it has utilized the knowledge and experience of several PhD students who are our content authors. And we're building it with something called Bookdown, which is an R package. I don't know if anybody's used Bookdown before or is an R users. But Bookdown allows us to sort of like do everything in GitHub. It's built into, well, it's not built into, but it integrates really well with GitHub and GitHub Pages, so we can publish this as a static site using the GitHub Pages feature. It is not Jekyll, it is R, and I am not an R person, so I have like, it's been a learning experience for me there as well. But I do think Bookdown is pretty great so far. But this is a much bigger project than like this maps example that I used, where we have all kinds of folks working on it, sometimes simultaneously, and we use branches and pull requests to make incremental changes. But in this case, it's really important that we use very specific issues and start our conversations and kind of preserve those conversations in in our GitHub account, in our GitHub repo. And you can see we have a bunch of stuff in here. I'll share this link if anybody wants to look at this. I would say don't share this too widely, just because there's a lot of work that we have to do. And like, honestly, it's probably a mess compared to a lot of other projects of this nature. But we're a group of people that are sort of learning this on the fly anyway. And so this, just the nature of these issues probably reflects that. We also have, because there are so many issues and a lot of people working on them, we felt that the assignee sort of feature for issues just didn't work very well. So we started using project boards. And project boards are really handy for us to create like a Kanban board. Kanban is, I don't know what it stands for, if anybody knows what it stands for, it's lost knowledge. But it's, we've got a to-do, in progress, and done sort of board that allows us to just sort of like at a glance look to see what's going on in a certain aspect of the project. Right now we have a sort of like a time-based project for this phase. That's a really bad example because we haven't actually moved some of our issues into this board. Let me give you a different example. So this is a board specifically made for one of our students that is going into this book and just standardizing all of the bibliographic elements in this book. And we set up this board for our student Nick to kind of utilize. And these are the things that we have assigned to this board. These are all issues that we've assigned to this board. And so Nick can go in here and take a look at some of the comments that we've made. So there's, if I go to the issue for full details, we can look at the, some of the instructions that my colleague Paul or I have given him to sort of work through this, and it's all right here for us, and we can kind of keep track of the progress. When Nick is working on something, let me go back to that board. You can literally drag these. You can see my cursor turns into like a move. You can click and drag these tasks or these issues into the in progress when he's working on this. Now that I've done that, Nick has probably gotten a notification that I moved his work from to do to in progress. And once he's done, he'll close the issue and it will go into our done section here. So as I said, it's a really good way. It's a better way than just looking at a long list of issues and tags and assignees to sort of think about what is being done and what needs to be done and what's sort of like pending or in the backlog. These boards can be set up really easily and they can be automated so that if you create a new issue, you can assign it a specific project board. Once it's assigned a specific project board, it appears here in the to-do, or if you can customize it other ways too, but for this one, it appears here in this to-do section. And then all we have to really do is move things over. And then as things are worked on and issues are closed, they can be set back into, or they're automatically placed into the done column. I'm gonna move that back for Nick so he doesn't get confused. So Kanban can sign ban board. Okay, great. This is good. I did not know that, and I didn't even know how to pronounce it. Maybe I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right, but that's great. All right, any questions about those two things? So those two sort of like tools that I use quite a bit, as I showed in the map collection sort of to-do repo, you can do these without any sort of files. The branches and forks are, these are really only useful if you are collaborating or working with people on updating files or updating things in your repos. And
Evan, I actually think the branches and forks might be one of the more important things to explain to folks
Sure.
that are new to GitHub. I think they're one of the more mysterious elements.
Yeah, totally.
We're going to talk about branching and forking here in just a minute when we start doing sites, because that's kind of
Perfecto.
core bit to that. So I'm glad you mentioned it.
Yeah, so let's see, where do I start? So when you create a new repo in GitHub, you're presented with a single branch, which now is called main. I'm going to go back to this, whoops, I went back to the organization, but if I go to the Geomatics Textbook repo, we've got 7 branches here, and they're reflected in this drop down here. If I click on the branch, when we created this, as I said, we had one called main. So I can switch from what we have as set as the default, which is called develop, to main. This sort of like aligns with a kind of a mature workflow called Git Flow, which, I'm not saying is I know it may not be the preferred method, the preferred like Git workflow anymore, but Git Flow is based on what are called branches. You have multiple branches for different features or states, I guess, versions of the project. And sorry, I don't want to overcomplicate this, so I'm trying to like hold back a little bit, but let's take a step back actually a second here and think about software development first, because I think this is probably a better analogy than my GitHub or my Geomatics textbook. But if you think about like versions in software, right, you have a base of code. You can continually use the code, or you can use the software even as new features are sort of like being developed by the developers. That continuous sort of deployment is done on a persistent branch, and if there's a bug or something that needs to be fixed, people can still use that branch while other people sort of work on these upgrades or fixes. And they would do that on a separate branch. So what they would do is they'd create a branch, which is like it takes a snapshot of that main branch or the source branch, the head, I guess. And people can kind of work on that, do their testing. And then once it's ready, they can submit a request to have it merged back into the main branch. So that's sort of like just sort of like my own description. Branches are done within the repository itself, whereas a fork it's similar to a branch, but it's done by some external sort of user. It doesn't have to be, but I think that's part of I think that's more of like a GitHub feature than an actual Git feature. I think this is sort of like where GitHub sort of helps with this aspect of open development, where I could, and we're going to demonstrate this in a little bit, but I could, as just a user, go to anyone's. Melinda she's got her code library from her presentation today. I could go there if I wanted to use her tools, and I thought I could make an improvement. I could fork her repository. She would see that there's a fork. She would know that that's there. And then I could work on it on my own for a little bit. And then once I'm ready to say, hey, Melinda, you know what, I added a new feature to your tool, I could submit a pull request. She would see that. And we could start a discussion at that point to sort of like merge that back into her main repository or her main branch. So those are the two sort of like, at least that's how I think of them, branches as being sort of like an internal repository workflow. And then forks are sort of like me being an outsider, kind of copying and building on somebody else's code. If anybody else wants to improve on those definitions, please jump in, because I know a lot of you out here. I've learned a lot of this from some of you in this room, and so or in this session. So please, by all means, add to my description. Destroying someone's branch when I was trying to fork something is one of my worst nightmares. You can delete your fork and it won't affect anyone's like the central or the main branch. So you don't have to worry about that. I remember feeling the same way when I was forking things. It might be part of a spring cleanup is just to go through our forked repos and ask ourselves if we're actually using this or if we can get rid of it.
I think it's the merging even more that scares me. I kind of oversimplified what I was writing, but like the merging part, I'm always, and I've had it happen actually with Geo-Librarian stuff where I've actually, I mean, it was fixed, but like I accidentally merged to the wrong branch. Because understandably, there are lots of different branches, but I'll still do it wrong. And I'm just like, oh no, I'm that person.
So yeah, I have these branches here in this repo, and these branches, so this is part of the going back to the issues thing, and this is just what I've learned so far, is that these issues come in really, really handy for when somebody is submitting a pull request with their branch. For me to go back as a reviewer of the code to say, okay, what is this? What is this branch? We started naming our branches after the issue titles, so that when somebody submits their pull request, we can see what it is. I can go directly to that issue. I can look at all the conversation that's happened. I can look at the direction that was given. And then once I know what's going on, I can review the code and I can look at it. And I assume that we have instructions to test this out on your local RStudio, make sure it builds. If it doesn't build, make it build before you submit the pull request, because that's going to affect me basically. And I have like, I don't want to call anybody out, but there's I have a pull request with like 25,000 lines of code that's been changed, but they only worked on a specific element of the of the textbook. And so, probably not the best case scenario for me as the reviewer to be like, okay, do I really have to filter through all of this stuff, or can I just dissect it into one of those specific issues and then get rid of everything else? Anyway, that's just one of the things that I've struggled with, and we've finally sort of ironed out with this project, and just sort of streamlining the process of like creating an issue, being very descriptive, and then when you submit your pull request, it's all right there. It's all like apparent to me what this is, and it makes my life a lot easier.
Hey, Evan.
Yeah.
There was a question in chat about reverts.
Yeah.
Going backwards, you want to talk about that?
Yes. So Phil, I don't know, you were reading up on reverts and resets, and you can do that. So actually, before I hand it over to you, Phil, if that's okay, so we can talk maybe a little bit about commits and commit messages, because it's really important to understand what your commits are versus like what your saving methods are, like saving your files on your computer. We typically, as I work, I'm constantly saving my files. I'm looking at the changes in my text editor or like Markdown preview or whatever I use to actually like visualize the changes. As I'm doing that, I'm just like saving all the time. Once I have completed sort of like a step of those saves or of those the work that I'm trying to do, I'll commit those changes, and it could be multiple saves later. I'll commit those changes, and what that does is it just adds my files to sort of like a staging area. They're basically ready. All those changes, all those saves are described in my commit message, and your commit message can be, has to be pretty short, but it should be as descriptive as you can. Make it in a brief statement or a sentence. And each of your commits has a hash, which ties it to like a specific state of your Git history, I suppose. And so you can go back to these specific states using that Git hash. You can also go back to specific states temporally by like 10 minutes or a day. But you really should, if you're going to do that, it's important that you be mindful of your commit messages that sort of describe what it is you did, because if you are going to go back, you're going to have to review those, and a good description is going to get you back to the right state much more effectively than if you just say like updates, 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 which I used to do for a long time in my commit messages. And so, yeah, I would definitely recommend making sure that you slow down, describe your commit messages as accurately as you can.
We should move on. Would it be helpful? I'm going to talk about GitHub Pages. Would it be helpful to just like kind of walk through for folks like, hey, you've got a GitHub repository, you're starting a brand new repository, and you want to see like, oh, I want to see how to add stuff locally to the repository. Cool. All right, I'll share my screen, flying by the seat of our pants a little here, and I'm okay with that. So let's see. Here's how this is how I like to do it if I'm like starting a new repo. And I know it's going to go onto GitHub. So here's GitHub, and you start a new repo really easily. I like to do it this way, starting on the web, so you don't have to mess around too much with trying to connect something locally with the web. You just clone the thing off the web and you have it. Make a repository. You can do whatever you want with it. Geo for the demo. A demo repo for repository. Usually you want to add a README file. And I'm just going to create. So right now there's nothing in it except this README file. Now the README is a .md. The .md stands for Markdown. If you look at a file in GitHub and you take a look at it, you can always look at the raw and see like what this thing really is. And this is just a really simple little Markdown file, .md. And I'll bring it down and we can play around with that. So what I usually do is clone it. So we talked about a fork and a merge. A clone is when you take something off the web and clone it down to your local machine. And it's really easy to do. So you hit the code button and it gives you a little link for it. You can just hit copy. And then locally, you want to open up a terminal. And so like I said before, Git Bash came with Git when I installed it. And I can open it up. It defaults to, let's see. This is just my main user directory on my computer. And if I want to clone it, I can do git clone and just paste this in. And I just hit run and it did the thing. And now if I refresh, I've got, let's see, what did I name that? It was Geo for lib demo. So there it is. It just added it locally. When you look in here, there's like a little hidden folder, and I have mine set up to show hidden folders. It might not even show this for you. Don't ever mess with that. But in here, there's a README file. And now we can do a couple of things. I can modify this file. What I'll do here is, this is my text editor, Adam. I'm going to add a project. I'm going to go to add a project folder. I'm going to add this folder. This is my workflow. Oh, I'm in documents for some strange reason. There we go. Okay, here's my Markdown file. For folks that are new to Markdown, it's just a little simple text file. So we've got geo for lib demo. One hash means it's a header level 1, similar to what you see on the internet or in HTML. Header 2, etc. I've taught GitHub Pages workshops before, which primarily run on Markdown. And I'm to this point where I don't even teach it because it's so easy. You don't even need to teach it. You can just learn it by looking at it. It is so easy. So anyone can do it. I'll save this. And you know what else I'm going to do? I'm going to add another file to this folder. So I usually do things like this. I'm going to just paste this in here. So I've got a folder now. It's got the README, and it's got one Geojson file. Okay, so now go over here in Git, in my terminal. I'm going to change directories. CD is what you do for that, and I'm just going to say cd geo for lib demo. It will just change into that directory, and it will give you this thing that's telling me, hey, this is your clue that it's a repository. It says main. That means you're on the main branch of this repository. If I type in git status, it'll give you some information. It says, hey, you've made some changes. You made changes to README. You've added something. It's untracked. Now I'll add it to what Evan called the staging area. I used to also do usually this, git add a star, which would just add everything like an asterisk. But since I have started being a little bit better about it, and adding, well, you can add things one at a time by just typing the name of the file. And then you can do git add everything like that. And it will just add everything that's new or untracked. And this is when the commit message is really important. And what I used to be lazy about too, I would just say like made updates, and that's not a good message. You always do a git commit after you do a git add or you change something. Right now, they're still untracked. And so to flag it with a message, you do a -m, that's a flag, and then you give it a quote, added Geojson layer and updated README. Okay, so it did a thing, says there were some changes. And then the next thing you want to do is git, let's see, we did git commit. So at this point, locally, everything's cool. We've backed it up. If we wanted to do a revert, here we go. I often mess this up. So if I mess it up, let me know. The thing you need to know about here is the logs. So we could do git log, and it will tell you like the things you've done in the past. And there's a big long message. This stuff, honestly, for me, this stuff is a little confusing. I learned there's a way to do git log -1 line. I think that's it. I think it's -1 line. Is that it? Yeah, and it will like tell you. These are those things you kind of got to watch out for. So if I want to go backward, I can use this number. So we can do like Git Revert, and we'll revert to that tag 7.2. Oh no, 2.2.2.3.1 E8, and then I believe this takes a message. You want to do a message with this? Is that right? Does anyone know? Or do we just do it like this? I think we just do it like this. Could not modify, conflict, modify, delete. I'm still afraid of the command line. Yeah, I'm afraid of the command line too. So hold on a second. Where are we? Git log. And let's see, everything's still there. So I haven't messed this up yet. Let me try it one more time. Anyone out there want to tell me how the revert works? I believe it's, I'm still afraid. Do either of you use GitHub desktop app? No. And the reason for that is that I think if you're doing this stuff, you need to learn the command line. And this is where, like, I will say, if you watch me struggle, like, that's kind of part of the learning curve. And the reason why I can't remember how to do this is I honestly just don't do it that much.
I'll jump in and say I also don't use that command very often, but we do sometimes revert commits using the GitHub interface. So especially if it's like a whole pull request and then it gets merged and you're like, oh man, that just blew everything up. They make it really easy. There's a nice little button that will do everything for you and create a little pull request that reverts all of the work you just did.
Cool. In this case, then I will go ahead and just like commit these changes. So we're good here. Didn't revert. It says I'm ahead of my main. Merge paths. Oh, you know what? I really messed this up. I'm going to go back. Oh, I'm in the middle of a revert. You know what? Let's abort. I'm going to just abort this example because I'm scared. So don't be afraid. If we're all in the same boat. Can we please move on to pages, because I think it's so important that I want to talk about it instead of this.
This is your show.
Let's talk about pages. That's what I'm actually prepared for. So, all right, GitHub Pages. If you guys go to GitHub and Google like GitHub Pages, you'll find it's super easy to set up a website on GitHub. GitHub Pages does static sites. What we mean by a static site is it's basically a website that is not too fancy, and it does, yeah, you're not going to find like something like an infinity scroll, but it's basically for web pages and sites that don't change that much. There's some guides on this page that I will come back to in a second, but what I wanted to do first was kind of show you how I use Pages. Pages works like this. So I've got my own GitHub Pages. And this is basically kind of my catch-all website. And honestly, I'm the main user of this website. I use it for myself to kind of remind myself things and like keep important stuff and like random code or things that I want to share with people. I can send them a quick link. For example, so it's sort of like my CV. I've got a few things on here and some presentations. I use it for a lot of teaching materials to share with folks. So there's a lot of things on here, old workshops I've taught and stuff like that. There's even a guest spot from my favorite geospatial metadata librarian that works at Stanford that you can go look at. It's a notebook. So let's look at the back end of this, and then I'll talk about how kind of setting these things up. So in GitHub, you'll notice that it's going to, the URL for your site is always going to be your username.github.io. And when you're doing this for the first time, you probably want to, well, if you're doing this for the first time for like a site that you want to be like your top level, your username.github.io, what you do is you set up a repository that has that same name. That's what you do for your top level site. Now, like I mentioned before, like my site is, like I said, is kind of like a catch-all web dump, and I put all kinds of things on here. The other day, I was, one of my students asked if I could post a notebook we did in class online, and I said, sure, I'll just slap it right here. And I just saved the notebook as an HTML and stuck it right here. So there's like a little homework assignment I gave them. And then I shared this with them later on the website, and I just loaded it here. But the thing is, like, people can go look at it on the front end if you just like copy this. And there it is. So it's just there on my main site. And like, if you look at this, you're like, oh, Phil's definitely not a web developer. Look at this. It's just like a flat, goofy looking site. But like I said, it's like my catch-all dump. And mine is just set up with HTML. Evan's, if you look at his, is really nice and clean and nice looking. Mine is a really basic HTML page. And I will talk about using templates here in just a minute. But like when I made this, I didn't even know what a template was and that you had cool templates that you could use on GitHub. So I just made a really, really basic HTML page. And there's a CSS page in here as well. So essentially, you could think of the front end being like this page and anything else. And your repo is like your sitemap. So everything just goes in here. It kind of works similarly to like a real, it is a real website, but something that was, you're hosting on your own server or something like that, and you just plop it down here. And it's actually really easy to set up. So you basically just dump this stuff in, and then you go into your settings and go and into the pages thing, and you literally just turn it on. I'm not going to mess with this, but I will demo like starting one of these from scratch. So that's my site. You can laugh at it all you want later. The So if you go back over to GitHub Pages, it walks you through a lot of stuff, and you can go in and say like, what is GitHub Pages? And they've got a really good video, and you can say like, hey, I want to make a user site, and it will tell you what you should do. Just like what I was describing the other day, like if you've never done it before, it usually says, hey, make it your username.github.io. That's going to be your new repository. And then there's some other things, and you can also make a project site. In fact, I know that the geoblacklight.org site is a project site hosted on GitHub, as some of you know. And you often see things like choose a theme. And if you are starting a new repo, I'm just going to go to any old repository here on my account that is not a site, a page, and go into, oh, I don't own that one. So for this one, if I went into pages and wanted to make it a page, you have an option to choose a theme. And I will say, tread lightly into this area. I actually, personally, I don't know how others feel about this and have done this. I don't necessarily recommend hitting this button to grab a theme, because it kind of hides a lot of stuff, and it uses remote themes, and they're less customizable. So let me talk a little bit more about themes and Jekyll. So if you Google GitHub Pages themes or supported themes, you'll find this page by GitHub, and they have all of these themes. And you can go in and look at them and check them out. These are the ones that are supported. You don't have to use the supported. If you Google like free Jekyll themes, you'll find like a whole ton of them. There are like literally hundreds of them out there, and a lot of them are really nice. These are just the ones that GitHub kind of maintains and supports. When you make it onto one of these GitHub themes, you can click usually over here, and they'll show you what it looks like on the front end. This one's called Hacker, and this is it. Okay. So this is a Jekyll template or theme. Jekyll is a static site generator. All of GitHub Pages runs on Jekyll. And you can learn more about Jekyll really quickly if you go check it out. You don't have to run it on GitHub. In fact, by playing around with Jekyll themes on GitHub, I think it's a great way to just learn about basic web development. I know I've learned a lot of things about web development by just playing around on GitHub Pages and messing with Jekyll. I will say this, you can install it locally and run a site locally. I'll demo that, but you don't necessarily have to. So let's talk about this hacker theme here that I clicked on. So it has the whole thing here, just like my site. This is the sitemap basically for this theme. And we talked a little bit about merges and forks and things like that. I'm going to fork this. A fork is basically you make a copy of your own. You're not messing with the original, and you're making a copy of it on your personal GitHub. And I'll just click myself here. Cool. And it made it. So I've got a copy. So really all I have to do now, you'll see how easy this is go in and turn it on. And again, you go to settings, pages, tell it which branch you're using, and click save. And it will literally say, we'll start building your site. And this can take like a minute or two. And while it is, I'll point out that back over in, oh, where to go? So we mentioned Markdown a second ago, and essentially Jekyll templates run on Markdown. So instead of creating an HTML page like I did for my personal site, everything in here is a Markdown page, which is way easier than using HTML. So for example, the index, which is always your home page, if I were to click on this and go to the raw, I can see the raw Markdown that was made for this page. So this is that web page. You can see there's headers and all of that stuff. If we go back here, it's the same page. There's a header 1, there's a header 2, there's a header 3. Markdown is so easy, you almost don't have to teach it. You just start typing it and look up the docs, and you've literally got it. I encourage everyone to play around with it. And to add a page to this, you literally just add a Markdown page. So let me see if it's built my site yet. Back, settings, pages, still waiting. So it will build it here. If I were to click it now, it will probably give me an error. So not there yet. So this can take like up to a minute or two. While that's going, I'm going to download it. So like we demonstrated a minute ago, it's really easy to bring this down locally. So I highly recommend, if you get into this, installing Jekyll and Ruby on your local machine so you can like make changes on your own machine and play around with it. So I'm going to clone this, same as I did a minute ago. This is my own version. I didn't clone the original. And I can change into this directory and see everything that's in there. Let's see. I'll show you here now that I now have Hacker. There's everything. Same thing we see in GitHub. And so let's play around. I'm going to add this into my Atom. I'm going to add a project. Where is it? Cool. And we can make changes. While I'm doing that, I will say, so I have Jekyll installed locally and Ruby, and in the notes we put some directions or a link to some directions on how to do that. But I can do bundle exec Jekyll serve and serve this out locally. And it will just serve it on a server on my own computer. And here's the URL for that. Copy that. So now I'm running this locally on my own machine. And if I want to make a change, I can just go over to the index, say, check out my 6 site, y'all. And if I save that now, I can pop back over and refresh it, and I made a change. There's other fun things we can do. This is where you want to start playing around and customizing and just messing around. I will show you all, a lot of the styling stuff is usually in this SASS folder. You can go and look at all the different themes and all that stuff. Like I just clicked on this Jekyll theme Hacker. This is kind of one of the main things. Like right in the middle here, it's saying for the body of this, your background is this images BKG ping. Okay. If I go and find my images folder, like, oh, cool, here it is. So it's just referencing this, literally this black image as a background. Well, let's play around and have some fun here. I'm going to change it. Going to add into my image folder. Let's see, assets, images. I'm going to add the Eye of Sauron and set that as my background folder, background image instead. Okay, just saved that. Now I have a really cool website. So now, okay, so now it's local. Let me see if my Okay, here's my one.
That was very, very GeoCities looking, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm all into
That was
like
so old
1994.
school.
old goofy websites. Look no further than this site. There's nothing different from like a 25-year-old site. This except
Oh,
for
it's great. That's a true nerd like website, right? Like
totally. So let me
that
push those
fancy
changes.
CSS.
What I'll do here is go back over to my terminal. I'm going to shut this down so it's not serving locally anymore. And again, git status. It's telling me, okay, you made a change to the SCSS, you made a change to index, and you added a thing. I'm going to say git add all of those. And I'm going to do git commit. Make some changes. And I'll do a git push, which will send it back to GitHub. Git push origin master. Cool. Now that is done. Back up on my GitHub site, we've got some changes. It already found my changes. And let's see if this can take a second to rebuild. So this will update momentarily and we'll have a really awesome website. Now note, this just shows up as kind of a sub site or sub page. Oh, I'm on the other one. Let me go back to this will probably update in a minute with those changes. Now, I will just point out that it just shows up under my main thing. So you could do this right now and go for it. And Becky said you make it look easy. Well, the truth is it is easy. So it's not that hard to do. And it will just show up over here. If you don't have a kind of like home site yet, it won't even matter. You can still just do it and it will just show up at that URL. So I would say play around a little bit before you go and make your kind of home-based site, play around with some of these other ones and it will just show up here. And then when you're ready, make your home one. Let's see. Hey, there it is. All right. Evan, I think what we're going to do now is talk about we're going to walk through doing an issue, a fork, and a merge back to the original.
And you have 11 minutes.
We can do it. So, okay, we set up a site. Let me see here. It's this one called.
Just for the record, we've got 30 minutes at least scheduled for social time, and for a lot of us, this is just the best social time right now.
Okay, glad someone's having fun.
So unless anyone has an objection, I have no objection to you going more longer than 11 minutes.
I think we can do it.
Yeah,
So-
I would say we can do it, but I would just encourage people to post things in the chat if they're like, we can talk about these things maybe as we go. So if you have something that you'd love us to talk about, please add it to the chat. But yeah, I think we can do this. We
Let's do
practiced
this
it.
because it is a good kind of example of like two people collaborating on one repository. So we just set this up a couple of days ago, and it's at my GH_GradBag. And I did go in and set this up as a basic page. And so if you go to the front end, you'll see this. It's a web map with a simple Geojson layer. If you want to see how all that was done, this is, again, one of the great things about GitHub is that all you have to do is just look at how we did it because it's all there, right? It's like the sitemap is published. So you can go and check it all out. All we have here, I had to put a little script in here that I just found on the internet that let me easily add a Geojson layer to my map. This is my map. It's a basic leaflet map. I'm sure many of you all can do that. In fact, all you really need to do is just copy that page and do it yourself and play. In our data folder, we have one Geojson layer. So if anyone has ever thrown Geojson into GitHub, you'll know that it will just render it for you, which is pretty awesome. And you can go and look at the raw version to see the raw Geojson, which is such a cool feature, because you can literally just tell a map to point at this, where'd it go? And it will just do it. I lost it. Here it is. Yeah, and it will just do it. So that rules. Now, we made an issue, and Evan is going to work on my issue. And the issue was, this map is boring. To do that, all we did was went into the issues thing and hit the new button and made one. That's all it takes to make a new issue. And so I've got this boring map and needs some stuff on it. And Evan, I think he's going to help me out with that.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here. And I am going to just pretend that I am someone from outside of this. I somehow discovered Phil's map or his repo in maybe a presentation he did, or maybe I'm like a student he works with and he has an issue, and I go in and I look at it and I read it and I say, okay, I wish, or Phil says, I wish this map had more stuff on it. So sad to see just the baseball field all along. If there were more really cool map features to stare at. So I'm going to take that as a suggestion, and I'm going to make an improvement based on this issue. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fork this as an outsider. I'm just going to go ahead and fork the repo. I'm going to add it to this organization. And so now I have like my own sort of copy of Phil's in my fork on UBC libgeo. And I can start to make some edits. One cool thing, I think we probably are all familiar with geojson.io. What did I spell JSON wrong? Geojson. Great tool. You know, you can just kind of quickly whip up some basic GeoJSON features in the browser. You can also log in and connect it with your GitHub account. So there's an authentication process, but I've already done this part. But now you can see I'm logged in and I can open up a file from GitHub. So I'm going to go to my GitHub repo, this fork that I just made of, oh, darn it. I forked to the wrong repo. I'm going to make a new fork. Sorry about that. I didn't authenticate that organization, so I'm just going to make another fork of it and add it to this account. Should only take a few seconds. There we go. Okay, so now if I go back and I open up a new file, I should see, oh gosh, do I have to refresh? Oh, please work. Darn it. Okay, I know that. Oh, there it is. Okay, so there's our GitHub grab bag repo that we just forked. And I'm going to navigate to that GeoJSON file. There's the coolers field. And I'm just going to create a new feature here. Let's create a Polygon feature. Just going to write my name. Or maybe just the first. No, I'll just write my initials. I have some unfortunate initials. Okay, so I'm going to save this to GitHub. I'll save it to the same location. I'm going to overwrite that file that I used, and I'll write my commit message, added my initials. Okay. So I've committed my changes to GitHub. So if I go back to my repo, I should see this. If I log in, you can see that I've made a commit 11 seconds ago, and there's my initials. So now if I want to add that to Phil's map and delete my branch, now that I'm done, I think I'm pretty satisfied with these two features that I made. I can contribute and open up a new pull request. So now what we're doing is we're submitting this GitHub grab bag fork to the original. And I'm just going to add a message here. Phil, I think I've made some. So now,
can I stop you? Oh man, never mind. I was going to have you read that little message across the top that that you have in the pull request and just sort of put it into layman's terms.
Sorry.
Yeah, no.
Which one was it? I can try it.
It was about it was the difference between the main and the head, and some of the language there is a little opaque.
Head, yeah. So I believe head is just a term. I don't know if I guess it's sort of like a description of the like central branch or the central repository. If anybody else who has maybe a better description or a definition of that.
I think if you think of like a snake, moving forward, you see these graphs of like changes and forks and all that. Like the head is like the part of the front that's furthest ahead.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
I think that's what it refers to.
Yeah, if you're working on a branch and you make a commit, like the head is where you are right now. So
you
like the most recent changes, right?
Yeah.
So that was
refer to head.
That's always been
mysterious
to me, is that language at the top there, because head seems like something more important than what I was working on. But head is the commit you just made to your own branch. Is that right?
Head is related to where you are.
Okay.
On that particular branch.
And you're trying to merge it into main.
Right.
Yep.
Which
That's
is the
all
name
right.
of the, yep.
So I am back. Now I can see I got a little message in my email said, hey, ECT123 made a pull request. And so now I can go back and say, what's going on here? Added my initials. All right, let's see this. So again, some of those things, it's saying ECT123 wants to merge one commit into my main from his version. Okay, so I can go in and say, well, let's see what's going on with this. It would be, I want to say, I can go ahead and merge. I can do some other things. Let's take before I do that, I might want to say, look at the changes that he's made. Maybe I'll just click on this and go check it out. And I can see that he made his changes. And maybe I like it, maybe I don't. I don't know if I do, but I'll merge it back anyway. So we can look, and what it says here is this branch has no conflicts with the base branch. So his head that he merged is merging that I'm about to merge back. Where's my button to look at the changes? I think it's
the files changed tab.
Oh, yes, thanks. So we can see here, like, okay, this stuff that's green, these are things he hasn't done anything to. And oops, if I look down, where's his new lines? I guess this is it, isn't it? Oh yeah, it's all green because everything's fine. If he had made a change to like something else, or we had made a change at the same time, we could have a conflict, and it will highlight in red everything where we need to take a look at it and maybe review or choose which version we want to do. That's called a merge conflict. And it's really easy to do in GitHub. It will usually like let you choose which one you want to do.
Can I just,
yeah.
You did something that was pretty cool where you added the plus, which allows you to create a little like message within the code. So like if there was some like one line or maybe like an area of the code that you wanted to discuss or you wanted to like at someone about, you could do that in that little feature, which is pretty cool.
So I could say something like, Evan, I don't know, what is this? Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and go back. Now that I've reviewed the changes, I'm going to go back and say, yeah, let's do it. I'll merge this. We'll say merge pull request. That's my commit. Sure. Now back on our site. We've done it. So Evan made a fork, then he made a change, then he put in a pull request, and then I went back and merged it. So that was that demo, and we've reached kind of the end of our agenda, right on time. But yeah, I guess we can hang around and talk and kind of just workshop some other things and answer questions.
Nicely done.
Well, you know, I think what you all witnessed here is that like Evan and I, we're librarians. And it's okay to not be an expert on any of these things. I feel okay with that. I'm also okay with like, yeah, my GitHub profile site is a big mess, and I kind of don't care because, you know, I'm just a librarian that hacks around. And so like, if you want to hack around, it's super approachable. Not long ago, I didn't know anything about this stuff either. I didn't know about Jekyll until Evan even said it to me in passing one day. I hope what we did here was try to bring down the intimidation level, and it's okay to mess things up too and have to learn and go back and look at the docs.
So I actually have a question about the librarianship and using Git. And I wonder if outside of the classroom, if you've had experience where a research student has a question or something, and it's just easy to like create some code, push it up onto Git, but then they might not have experienced that. I wonder if you've actually encountered that and how you've overcome this hurdle.
I certainly have, and I'm sure some other folks here have as well. And I do think it is, okay, from a librarian's perspective, a lot of my colleagues are always talking about like information literacy. And I do think that GitHub really is a data literacy skill that our students, especially people working like or fringy on tech things, need to understand, or people that are working on research projects that if they have a desire to keep things open, they need to understand this is part of the deal at this point. It is part of like the modern ecosystem of research. So yeah, I mean, then a lot of the things that, you know, I've done with students, and I'll let Evan chime in as well, or anyone else, is walking through some of those basic things that we just did. And we teach, I know you all do this too, Evan. We teach GitHub and Git Pages workshops that have a little bit more documentation, things like that, than we did today, and walk like a group of students through these things. It was part of a data boot camp we ran at my library last semester that was like super popular. So I do think there's a desire for folks to learn this stuff. So like but in an individual setting, yeah, but let's talk about GitHub.
I'll be really quick because I don't want to eat into our social time much longer, but I have not worked with a student yet that isn't interested in learning this. And it's been a real, I feel like just having, like I've worked so far in the last couple of years just on 2 grant funded projects that get students into work with this sort of stuff. And I think that, you know, that's part of the value, I think, of some of these projects, is that there's definitely an interest from students, and there's an interest from faculty to teach their students about these kinds of skills, especially when it comes to instruction, because there's so many students out there who desire to have instructional skills, and GitHub will, especially if you integrate GitHub into some of the instructional learning parts, it seems to be like a mutual benefit. Yeah, we get students in from across campus to develop content. We teach them how to create the content, and then they get skills delivering it, and they get constructive feedback through some of the built-in GitHub features. And so it's just sort of like a win-win all around. So yeah. And just having a lot of the instructional content out there is nice, because you can point people into the direction if they're unable to, sort of like make a workshop or a consultation live. We always have a persistent link to point them to.